Welcome to the Pittsburgh Dish. I'm your host, Doug Heilman. How did a bountiful summer garden lead to over 30 years of local food television that other public broadcast stations just can't replicate? We talk tales of cooking, family, romance, and banjos. From Brooklyn to Pittsburgh, to Rome, and back again, all with this week's guest. Stay tuned. Thanks for listening to the Pittsburgh Dish. Check out our website at www.pittsburghdish.com for past episodes, our recipe blog, or if you'd like to support the show. That's www.pittsburghdish.com. Now, on to the show. Thank you so much for coming over and for being on the show.
I'm glad to be here.
Would you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Well, I'm Chris Fennimore. A lot of people think of me as that cooking guy.
That's
because for the last 31 years, we have been doing cooking shows on WQED here in Pittsburgh. And the thing about the shows is that they are not like Julia Child or Jacques Pepin, where you have somebody who is a culinary genius and a wizard in the kitchen. All of the guests on our show are people in our broadcast area. The first one I did was Z is for zucchini. And it was so strange because I had a garden filled with zucchini right up here at the Homewood Cemetery.
Oh, yeah.
And the zucchini were so plentiful that summer that you could stand at the edge of the garden and zucchinis would jump into a basket. You know, I didn't know what to do with all of these. So I went back to the office. I was also the director of programming there. And I said to my director of continuity, Nancy Polinsky, I said, Nancy, would you please make a promo, a little thing, asking people to send their recipes for zucchini? She said, is that legal?
You're crazy.
I said, well, I need a lot of recipes for zucchini.
Yes.
And she goes, but are we allowed to do that? And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, it's in our budget. We can make little promos.
Yes.
And so she did. And she said, if you have recipes for zucchinis, send them to this address. And all of a sudden, it was like pandemonium at the station because the letters came pouring in.
The response was overwhelming.
To say the least. Now, I'm reading through these, trying to figure out what would be good recipes for me to make. And they're not just recipes. They're family stories. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure I've told you this story.
Yes.
That they would be like this. This is my Aunt Margaret's recipe for stuffed zucchini boats. My Aunt Margaret never married. So we're already on a tangent here.
You were, yes.
And she used to come to our house every Thanksgiving because she didn't have any other place to go. And she always brought these zucchini boats because she wanted to feel like she was participating in the meal. And we never liked the zucchini boats.
You're getting a lot of story.
I know. So here's this maiden aunt,
wow.
But they love her, so they don't say anything about how terrible these zucchini boats are.
Oh, and by the way, here they are for your cookbook or your show or whatever.
Right, exactly. But then the story goes on and it says, now that my Aunt Margaret is gone, we still make these every year. Uh-huh. And what I realized was that recipes, our kinds of recipes, not the fancy-dancy ones, but our kinds of recipes are all about family history, the promulgation of family ethics and traditions, and it's all conveying stories, and that you relive those stories every time you make whatever that dish is. And you, so many of the recipes in all of our cookbooks are Aunt so-and-so's this, Uncle Ronnie's that, my grandma's this. We did a whole cookbook on Grandma's Kitchen Wisdom.
Mm-hmm.
Only recipes from Grandma's. If you weren't a grandma, don't bother sending it in. That one is still one of my favorite cookbooks because the stories in there were unbelievable. And in our old cookbooks, we used to actually put a lot of these stories,
right?
Not just the recipe, but as much of the stories as I could fit in there. And so I got all these recipes, and I thought, this is something unique. I'm also a program producer,
right? You
so
really had something here.
So I said to the person who was the station manager, I said, could I have a little time during the next pledge period? Because I would love to do a demonstration of a couple of recipes, and I'll type up these recipes and offer them as a thank you gift, like the tote bag or the coffee mug or whatever people use. And so he said, sure, knock yourself out. Well, we didn't have a kitchen.
At what year is this, Chris?
1990. Yes, 93. It was the summer of 93. So Nancy and I set up 2 tables, and I cooked the 5 or 6 recipes that I picked out of the book.
Ahead of time.
And then I had all the ingredients. And so the ingredients were on the front table, and the finished dishes were on the table behind me. And so I would say, so then you chop this up, and then you put the onion in there, and then you slice that, and blah, 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 and put it in the oven for 45 minutes, and it comes out like this. And then we would taste it. Well, the phones rang off the hook. People wanted these. And we were reading, while I'm making believe I'm cooking, Nancy is reading the letters from everybody who sent in their recipes. So it was very heartwarming, and it was, I thought, particularly appropriate for public broadcasting.
Right. Because
this was our way of sharing, for them to share with us and for us to share back with them. And that, to me, that's what public broadcasting is all about.
Aside from keeping all these loved ones' stories alive through the cooking, you're bringing the community into the station.
Well, on the next show, because what happened was immediately the people in the pledge department said, when's the next one? And I said, I have no idea. I didn't know this was going to happen. We picked cookies as the topic. Oh. Then we decided that I wasn't going to make all the cookies. We were going to have people come in and make their cookies. And that was the beginning of the format that we have now followed for the last 31 years. Yeah. And that is that people send in their recipes. We get usually, a couple of 100 recipes. Mm-hmm. We select 4 or 5 people to come on the show. I usually make one recipe. Nancy usually makes one recipe. And that is not so much a matter of our egos involved in, we've got to be part of this, but it's a timing matter in terms of production.
Yes.
So I usually do the first or the last, and Nancy does the first or the last. And that way, if I need to do it all in 5 minutes instead of 12, I can do it.
Yes.
And
smart.
And also, if we're stuck for time, I can just stand there and talk.
It works out.
It works out that way. So that's why I've been doing some of my recipes on that show. Anyway, that's how the cooking thing got started. But because I'm not people always say, "Oh, Chef Fennimore, Chef Chris," and I said, "No. I'm not a chef. I'm just a cook." The only cooking that I learned was from my mother and my grandmother, who we lived with my grandmother.
And this is in Brooklyn.
This is in Brooklyn, New York. I was born there in the 1940s, and it's not a secret. I'm 77 years old, so you do the math.
Yeah.
And we lived in the Bay Ridge section of Brooklyn, which was an interesting combination of ethnic influences, because right in my few blocks around our local church, it was all Italian. Then the next group was the Irish. And then there were the Greeks. And we had a Jewish community. So it was really, you could walk a few blocks and get the Norwegians. I forgot about the Norwegians. Oh my goodness. It was wonderful to go over there.
So you could get all these food influences as a young person.
Exactly. And I did, So that's where I grew up. And my grandmother, being the oldest of 8 sisters, she was the one who had the Sunday dinner. And everybody who could come came. So we were somewhere between 15 and 25 people every Sunday around our table.
Amazing. And didn't she make like dozens of dishes?
Oh, yeah. Appetizers, then there was the pasta course, then there was the main course, then there was the dessert, then there was the wine and the fruit. It just went on all day.
Could you imagine cooking for 30 people every weekend?
No.
But she just did it.
She just did it. And she was a seamstress, so she was at work every day because she had to take the subway to Manhattan. She worked on 34th Street in the garment district. So she would leave the house at 6:30 in the morning, get home at 7:30 at night, and she would miss dinner because my dad insisted on having his nightly dinner at 5 o'clock. So she would always have her little soup and beans and greens, or just escarole. She would just do escarole and whatnot. Anyway, back to the Sunday dinner. As soon as you were old enough, they would start giving you jobs that they thought you would be capable of. Like, okay, here's how you shell peas. And they would give you a bushel basket full of peas, and you'd go there, and that's what you did after you went to church in the morning. So we would come home, and we would just start working on this dinner. And I remember the time that I graduated, she says, all right, here's the meatball mixture. She didn't trust me to mix it.
Oh, no.
No. But she thought I could shape them. So I thought, okay, I could shape a ball. And, I took a little bit. It's like Play-Doh, you just roll it around in my hand. And I put it on the tray. And another one, and I put it on the tray. Now, there were like 100 meatballs. So it took me a little while. She comes over and she looks at it. Some of them were a little bigger, a little smaller and everything. She points to one that's small. She says, who's that for? I said, well, I don't know, whoever gets it, She says, well, what if it's one of our guests?
Oh.
And they think that we're holding back on them and that everybody else has got a big meatball and they got a small meatball. How are they going to feel?
Oh.
What are they going to think of me?
She gave you her inner monologue there.
So she dumped all of the meatballs back in the bowl, and I had to reshape them.
Oh, my goodness.
Uniformly.
Do you know how old you are at this point?
About 8, 9.
Oh, yeah.
And it was a lesson learned, about that's one of the aspects of cooking and serving and feeding people.
Always thinking about the other people.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So that training I did have, but, there was none of those other culinary things out of, flip the saute pan or whatever they do.
You and I both. I mean, I always say I'm a home cook. Too.
Yeah, exactly.
I've learned from watching people like you. I've learned from a lot of PBS shows how to cook beyond what my mom and my family members taught.
Yeah.
But I've also never gone to culinary training of any sort.
I used to go down to the culinary school downtown, and sometimes they'd ask me, would you like do a demo? And I said, I don't have anything to demo for them. I'll be glad to talk to them, and I can show them some home recipe that they can convert to fancier. I said, but I'm not a chef, and they just couldn't get over it. They said, you're on TV for Pete's sake. Of course you're a chef. No, I'm not.
But it's part of your accessibility. Actually, I think all of those other community members that are writing in and sending you recipes, they don't feel intimidated to not do that because you are just cooking with them,
right? In
the same way that they would be cooking.
And the thing about the recipes that they send in is they never send in their worst recipe, other than Aunt Margaret's zucchini boats,
which they still make.
What they're sending you are the recipes that they are famous for. That always comes out, and people go, "How do you make that?"
Yes,
when you go to a potluck and you're bugging the person for the recipe, and so they learn and they just start making recipe cards that they put down next to their casserole, Those are the recipes that they're sending us, that we put into our books. And as I say, it's now been hundreds and hundreds of guests, maybe 800-900 guests over these years. That's a lot of people.
It's incredible. And I just want to point out, most affiliates in the PBS world don't always have kitchens or anything like we've had. So it's such a treasure for our community on the programs you guys have brought over the years.
Yeah.
You have me thinking, and actually I'm thinking back to the first time you told me this story. Is it true the zucchini program, it wasn't even taped?
No, we just did it live.
Right.
It was an hour and a half that we filled, and then that's it. Boom.
And from then on, do you have any ballpark idea how many shows you've done? You've done 2 new ones this year, Gadgets and Gizmos, Sweets.
And Sweets, yeah. And then just before that, we had done the When in Rome show.
When in Rome.
Yeah.
And that's when I got to, thank you so much. I got to make meatballs with you from Dan
Mancini.
That's right. Mm-hmm.
Yes, because he puts the
mortadella in the meatball.
He grinds it in. It's such a wonderful trick.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm limiting the number of shows that I do, which is fine with me. And they're all national now. We don't just do them for local. Because the stations around the country were not able to replicate what we did.
Right.
So they run all these shows. But other than that, I would say we've done about 160 shows.
Incredible.
Yeah.
And do they all then have like a community cookbook?
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And then we started to take segments from those cooking shows, the marathons, because it would be like, in the old days, we made 4-hour shows. I don't know what I was thinking of. We went from 1.5 hours to 4 hours.
Wow.
And in 4 hours, you'd have 10 or 11 demonstrations. So with that many recipes to do on air, we were still doing 6 or 7 of them a year.
Yes.
So I had all of these segments, which I was able to take some, edit them down to about 15 minutes, take out, and now I stir it for 12 minutes, and then you just cut that down in time until they were all about 12 minutes. And then we would make half-hour programs with 2 of these recipes in each program. Yes. And we've done 7 seasons of those.
Of that, yes.
Yeah, so that's 26 shows times 7.
Oh, my. I can't do that kind of thing.
It's a lot of shows.
It's a lot of shows.
That's what they're running now is season 7 of the QED Cooks morning show every Saturday at 10 o'clock.
For our listeners that maybe haven't been so in tuned with you, the national shows we now call America's
Home Cooking.
That's right. And when they were more local or regional, did we call it QED Cooks?
No, we had a title for each show.
Oh, okay.
Sometimes it was just whatever the recipe was,
yes.
Or the main ingredient, like we did cookies.
Yeah, you did the alphabet, almost like A to Z.
Berries, appetizers, soups and stews, seafood. And then we started to do things like Grandma's Kitchen Wisdom,
Church Lady Cooking.
Church Lady Cooking.
That's a good one.
It was a wonderful show.
Oh, yes.
Oh, my goodness. We actually did 2 of those because we did one set of them, and all these other church ladies came and they were banging on my door going, what about us?
As they should.
So we did. And a whole new cookbook because we had all these new recipes from new churches and so on.
Holiday sides.
Holiday sides was it. I keep that on my counter. Because there were so many great recipes in there that my family now demands on Thanksgiving and Christmas and so on.
And I've noticed they still play it almost every, November or maybe October. It'll play again. It's classic. It gives you great ideas too. But along the way, it still connects you with all those community members and still the stories. When the people come on, we should say they're still telling the story.
Oh, absolutely.
You're asking them about the story behind the recipe.
That's what we do while we chop onions.
It's so much better than a lot of the other food TV that's out there. Truly.
Yeah. I mean, I have to say that I liked the old style where you actually learned something. They gave enough time to the process and the procedure and the ingredients for you to say, okay, I would try that. I would try to make that. And if it was Julia Child or Marianne Esposito or Lydia Bastianich or so many Sarah Moulton, great cooks.
So many cooks.
To learn from. And I thought, even in the best cooking schools, you're not necessarily getting somebody with that kind of expertise and background.
Right.
Did you know that Sarah Moulton was Julia Child's kitchen assistant when she did her series?
I just recently saw this picture of them, and Sarah Moulton looks like a little girl. I mean, she's not very tall to begin with, but she's very young.
Oh, yeah. No, she looks like she's 16, but I don't know what age she actually was. But she's a delightful lady. I got a chance to meet her. That, I have to say, has been another nice part of all of this, because once you get identified as a TV cook or celebrity.
You are a little bit of a celebrity, Chris.
You get to meet other celebrities.
Yeah.
And to me, it was a thrill. I had a chance. I'm good friends now with Marianne Esposito. Can imagine that.
She's so great.
She's terrific and just a down-to-earth kind of lady. And Jacques Pepin came to town and he said, I don't want to give a lecture. It was a lecture series. And they said, well, what would you do? And he said, well, if you could get somebody like Chris Fennimore, who's a local guy, he knew about my show. And if he just asked me questions.
Amazing.
So I got to spend all this time on stage with Jacques, asking him questions, mostly about his book, The Apprentice, which if you haven't read that, by the way, The Apprentice by Jacques Pepin.
Okay.
He's a brilliant writer. His language as he talks makes it seem like maybe he's not that good at English. He's brilliant when he writes it. And he has his master's or his doctorate from Columbia. So this is no slouch here. And it shows in the book, The Apprentice, and it really comes through. And then I went out to lunch with him and his daughter, Claudine, who did a couple of seasons with him on his cooking show.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Where did you take them in Pittsburgh?
Oh, no, I didn't.
Okay.
They had it at this affair.
Okay. Okay.
That the whole deal was you got the whatever this was lecture, and then they had a luncheon, and so I was with him at his table. Yeah.
Because I would be stressed. Where am I taking?
Oh yeah, I know. See, and I got to tell you, my safest bet would be to take him home.
Yes. Yeah.
Because he would dig that. He'd get it.
Of course.
Every
chef I've met is so grateful to be cooked for, and they're not going to be judging you.
No, not
at all.
If you go to a chef's house and look in their refrigerator, first of all, it's pretty empty.
That's right.
There might be a bottle of wine in there.
That's right.
But they don't have anything to cook at home.
No.
And they love home cooking.
It's not what you do in the restaurant. It's very different. It's very production. And I think that's why I've never gravitated to wanting to work in a restaurant, because there's such a rigor and a monotony to getting it right and again and again and again.
Exactly. That's the chef's talent or specialty. And that is that they make a dish on Tuesday, they make 40 of them on Tuesday, and they make 40 more on Wednesday, and they're exactly the same, all 80. How do you do that?
I couldn't. But it's what people want.
It is, because when they go back and tell their friends, oh, I had the chicken limon, you got to have it, and all of a sudden it's not the same, then it would be very disappointing.
No.
I mean, they count the number of capers they put on the darn dish,
Before we get too far away from talking about the show and these memorable moments, you've done all of the cookbooks for the pledge drives, but there are 2 books that you've written yourself.
Right.
Simple Pleasures.
Right.
And you had a co-author.
Yeah, Daniel Aguera.
And he's local as well.
Oh, yeah.
How did that come about? It's a little different than the other books.
It's very different. I had him, it was for a short documentary that I did. Well, it was the Fat Club. And the Fat Club is a group of chefs, local, who come together every once in a while. They used to do it at least twice a year, but now it's sort of dropped off. And they try to kill each other with food. What they're doing is they're trying out new recipes, and they want sophisticated palates and whatnot to see what they're doing and to critique it, tell them how they might change it, and so on. And they invited me to one of these. So I brought a film crew, and we filmed this thing. I could watch that darn thing over and over again. Anyway, Daniel was there. He's never done restaurants. He's done more institutional cooking.
Okay.
But he made this soup that was so delicious. And maybe it was soups and stews that we were doing. And I said, would you come on and do that? And that's how we met. He came on to the show and he did this soup that was from his family origins. He's from Spain.
What I really like about that cookbook is it's almost every other page is a recipe from you and a recipe from him.
Mm-hmm.
They are simple. I mean, they're very approachable.
Yes.
And yet you both give your family spin on as it would be a soup or some kind of casserole or something. It's a great book.
Oh, it is. And the recipes are simple. You don't have to go to a specialty store to get the ingredients, or these are things we all have. And that we're all capable of the directions for. You don't have to souffle any eggs or, do you souffle an egg? Is that what you do?
No, I don't know. I haven't. And then, and this was around 2017, and then you did a follow-up, and I think this is yours solely. It's stuffed.
Yes, stuffed. Well, because the publisher said, when's the next one?
Of course.
And so I thought, what would be interesting? What's a thing, first of all, that I haven't done with WQED?
Right.
And then I thought through all the dishes that my mother and my grandmother made, and, like 60% of them were stuffed, meaning something inside something else, whether it was a cream puff or a manigotta or a braciole. Grandmother made braciole with beef. She made it with pork, different fillings, but everything was wrapped up in something else. So I said, okay, stuffed.
I love it. I actually thought you drew a lot of inspiration even from Pittsburgh because we love pierogi and, stuffed cabbage rolls and all of the things. And
they're all in the book.
They're in the book too. So I think you drew from a little bit of both family and
yeah. But I started thinking about that. And then, my mother also made stuffed cabbage and she made pierogis. And because my dad grew up in a Polish neighborhood.
Okay.
He was in an Italian family. But all of his friends, he would go and he enjoyed having their food. And that's what he wanted to have. So my mother said, I'll learn how to make it. Heck, my mom used to make chow mein. She, this little Sicilian girl. Yeah. And she's there in Brooklyn making chow mein and egg rolls.
She's very similar to my grandmother, who was sort of English and German descent, but had 10 kids, learned how to make tacos. What we called Italian spaghetti through the 70s. I don't know why we didn't just call it spaghetti. She incorporated all of these, these cucina polvida, the food of the poor.
Yeah.
But that was
soul
her.
food.
Soul food, that's right. And so she made all that. And I think that's any wise woman with a big family in that era would do the same thing.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, and also we kids were influenced by what we saw on television. Mm-hmm. And in a way that prior generations might not have been. So I'm looking at the Chungking chow mein commercials and going, can we get that? Can we get TV dinners? Can we get pot pies?
Yeah.
My mother made the most delicious chicken pot pie you could ever imagine putting in your mouth. And we were bugging her. Can we have the ones in the little tin? So finally she bought them. They weren't that expensive, but there wasn't a lot of space in my mother's budget, but she relented. And we tasted and we go, that's supposed to be pot pie?
Awful.
It was awful. There was no chicken in it.
Oh, no.
There was no pot. It was just a pie. That's all.
Well, you learned your lesson
I did.
On industrial food. And I'm glad you did.
Hi, this is Chris Fennimore, the host of QED Cooks, and I'm here with you on the Pittsburgh Dish.
If you don't mind, I would love to talk about family a little bit more, but I'd love to go back and talk about the zucchini story and your wife.
Oh, yeah. Well, my wife played a big part in that whole zucchini thing, because the reason why I was in the garden was that I was in a church choir and going through a tough period in my life. My first marriage hadn't worked out as
so many folks
can happen.
Yeah.
So I was feeling depressed a little bit, and I went to a psychiatrist. He said, Mr. Fennimore, you're not depressed. You're sad. With that was in some ways very enlightening. So I joined this choir, and we would practice every Thursday, and we sang at church every Sunday. And one of the members of the high sopranos, when we were getting ready to wrap up the season, because we didn't sing through the summer, she said, I've got a little garden right off of Forbes Avenue, and it's part of the Homewood Cemetery, and I've got a plot, but I'll never use it all. And she said, I travel, and I won't be able to tend to it all the time that it might need. So would you be interested? So I said, well, yeah, okay. I was living in an apartment.
And how long had you been in Pittsburgh at this point? Just a couple of years?
No.
No?
No. I came here in 85. So
okay.
I was here like 8 years.
Okay.
And so I put in what you would think of some tomatoes. I put basil, and I put zucchini. I put the zucchini in as bushes because I didn't want those long stringy vine zucchini. I thought it would be easier to find them and harvest them and all that jazz. Well, I was going to the garden, and it started to be like every single night. And I came home. I remember I was living in an apartment with my daughter, Marianne, and I said, there's something wonderful about this gardening. It's making me feel so much better about myself and life and everything. And of course, she's 13 years old, so she goes, was Laura there? In her teenage voice. And I said, yeah. And she goes, uh-huh. So my daughter was onto the whole thing before I was, because the fact of the matter is that I was starting to feel good about myself in every way.
Yeah.
And being with Laura was a big part of that. So what happened with all of this attention given to the garden, as I said, the garden was booming with zucchini, and I went in and did the whole thing about send the recipes in, and
at QED.
At QED, and it was very successful. So then they said, "Now we got to have another show," and I said, "Cookies." And the first show was in some date in August was when we did the zucchinis, and December the 4th was the day that we did the cookie show. And I know the date because that's the day that I married the girl from the garden.
Oh.
Laura and I got married. We did the show in the morning, and I got married in the afternoon, just so you know where the priorities are.
Goodness.
But the advantage was that my mother was in town for the wedding, and she got to come on the cookie show with me, and she made her Vienna tarts, which are outstanding, especially with the apricot filling.
What a special day.
Oh, yeah.
All around.
All around.
Oh.
And so everybody, my whole family was sitting in their motels and hotels or houses and watching my mom and I cook on TV.
And that's amazing. And so you mentioned your first daughter. You have two daughters from your first marriage. And then you ultimately had a son with
Joe.
Laura. And he's grown up on the show.
I think he came on the show first as almost as an infant, and I'm holding him in my arms. Mm-hmm. Then he was a toddler, and we put him up on a stack of crates, and I kept wondering if he was going to fall over and whatnot. And then before you know it, he's taller than I am, and he's standing there. And I just saw him on the show this past Saturday, and I forget what we were making, but he said, yeah, I'm going to go to Case Western, start next year. So this is him as a senior. It's a Central Catholic. And
he's documented on the
on these
cooking shows.
And I can't tell you how many people come up to me and they'll say, oh, I enjoy your show. How's your son?
Yeah.
They want to know. And so I'm always happy to tell them. Joe's back here in town. He's after he graduated, he worked in couple of different places, but he ended up back here. He works for Dick's Sporting Goods as a software engineer. I didn't know that sporting goods stores needed software engineers, but apparently they do.
Apparently we all do. You sparked my mind on a couple of other things, so I would love to go back and talk a little bit more about, you mentioned you joined the choir, and that's where you met Laura. Music is actually kind of a big deal in your family life.
Oh, yeah. Well, that was what I thought I was going to do when I was in early college and whatnot. I was a folk singer, and I used to go down to the village and sing in the village square there in Lower Manhattan.
Okay, yes. Mm-hmm.
And so I would go over there. Never panned out to be a famous folk singer, but I enjoyed it. I still enjoy it. I still have my same guitar. that I've had since senior year in high school.
I've had the privilege of seeing you play that guitar in your house during Christmas carols.
Christmas carols, right.
Yeah.
Well, then what happened was I was at Fordham, and I had 2 years down, and I had completely run out of money. My tuition was covered. I had a scholarship, but I had no money to buy tokens to get on the subway, to go home, nothing to eat. Nothing, I couldn't afford the room that I was in, which was $7 a week.
Oh, boy.
At Mrs. Selbreed's up in the Bronx. I have to go look for a job. And I think if I can save $200, I can make it through the next semester. So a bunch of the guys said, come down with us. There's a club down close to the village, 10th Street. And we're waiters there. And we make sometimes $30 a night. I went, get out of here. $30 in one night? Yep. So I go down and I go up to the manager and say, I'd love to apply for a job as a waiter. And he looked at me and he said, we are up to our armpits in waiters. We don't need another waiter. He says, if you could play the banjo. I said, I play the banjo. I lied.
Yeah.
I didn't.
But you played the guitar.
Banjo, but I played guitar. I figured,
right.
How hard could it be? Mm-hmm. So he says, all right, go up on the stand and play something. And I said, I didn't bring my banjo. And he goes, they have extras. Oh. Now I'm doomed. Oh. So I went up on stage, and I'm watching the guy next to me, the lead banjo player, a guy named Ron Bizel. And when he moved his hand up the strings, I moved my hands up, but I wasn't hitting the strings with the pick. I wasn't making any noise at all. And I'm singing these songs because I knew all these songs. My dad we would always sing these in the car, 5 for 2, Heart of My Heart, Darktown Strutter's Ball. And it came in handy because when we finished, the manager said to him, how does the kid do? And Ron wasn't paying any attention to me at all. And he said, yep, yeah, he knows the songs. Mm. And that was it.
Got it.
They hired me. Oh. Now I have to run home, get a Mel Bay chord book and a banjo. And that's how I started my banjo career, which then lasted, for...
Well, I was going to say, you're sort of leading us to say your banjo career is over, non-existent. But people can go to the Elks on the North Side.
Yes.
And find you with the Pittsburgh Banjo Club. That's where you guys do all of the rehearsing and a lot of singing.
Oh, yeah. Oh, no, so we do like 2 shows.
If folks are interested.
Every Wednesday.
Yeah. You should come by the Elks.
It's a good place.
It is a really good place. Another local treasure.
Yeah.
And we should say, too, your daughter is a pretty successful singer.
Yeah,
but she doesn't live here.
No, Marianne lives in Rome.
And you leave Pittsburgh a little bit every year.
Well, she's got 2 boys. I got my grandsons are over there. Oh. So I'm not going to leave them just sitting around over there.
It doesn't make it hard. Is it? Do I get this right? You escape the winter, essentially. You go over right after
here's the thing. Yeah,
Christmas.
I go right after Christmas and stay for a couple of months. The winter temperature in Rome average, 55. So you can just wear like a windbreaker or a light jacket, and you're good for the winter. Now, don't look at the Italian people. They are scarfed, covered, leggings, down vests and coats, and you would think it was the Arctic.
Yes.
That's the way they dress when it's 50. I don't know what is. It's something about maybe their blood is very thin.
Maybe,
I don't know.
Or maybe they're trying to just get the Italian fashions out that they've stored away. And I'm sure the food isn't bad over there. Does it re-energize you in any way?
It does, absolutely. The access to daily fresh fruits and vegetables, hand cut meats.
Yes,
to order to your preference in every way. And everything fresh. That's all they think of. And the assortment of cheeses, and which they think is normal, Mm-hmm. Like, where can you go on a daily basis and get fresh ricotta? Mm-hmm. I mean, you can make it yourself. I often make my own ricotta.
Yes.
But when they make it, they're making it with sheep's milk, or they're making it with cow's milk, and they also make it with buffalo. Mm. Like buffalo mozzarella, they make the buffalo ricotta. And they all have different textures and curd structure and so on. So, yeah, it's fun.
Nothing like it. Bringing us back to Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Number one, I just want to thank you for sharing so much today. And wondering, I know you're not doing as many shows on QED as you used to, but what is on the horizon? Do you have any shows or even demos or anything coming up in the near term?
One of the things that I've been talking with folks about is making the inventory more accessible. Because as we have talked about, there's hundreds of segments with people from the community. Occasionally, I'll have somebody come up to me and go, my grandmother, she was on that show when you did tomatoes, and she made her favorite tomato casserole. And my grandmother just passed away. Is there any way I could get a copy of that? If I can, I go back in, I go into the archives and find the tape and transfer it and make a CD for them. But that's old-fashioned.
Right.
Now, there should be some way to digitize the entire thing.
Yes.
And then have it accessible by the person, by the show, by the recipe, by the ingredient.
That would be amazing.
So this is a little bit of, if I could hire my son, he could probably do this.
Yes.
and make a spreadsheet, that gets you in and out of all of those variables. But I'm sure that they have people at WQED who can do this too. So that's one of the things I'd like to do. And the other thing is to make them accessible for the younger people who are accustomed to getting video material directly.
At different platforms too, whether that's short form, other social media platforms or whatever. How do you get to it where it's not just a rerun or maybe somewhere on the website where you have to dig for it? Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I'm exploring now. I'm trying to be modern,
I love it. Well, we never stop learning in food anyway, and this is part of it for you.
I'm not sure if and when we might do another giant show because they take a lot of time, a lot of planning.
I've noticed.
And because you've been part of those.
A little bit.
But you got to collect the recipes and then get the cooks that you're going to have on and book time to shoot them. It's easier now because we don't do them live. Man.
I can't imagine, Chris.
Live was so crazy,
It's part of the element, though, it's fun. Even when they are not live, they're still pretty true to form.
Oh, they're live to tape.
They are live to tape, yeah.
We may edit something later on, and we can stop.
When I put the food processor on backwards for you.
Exactly. And we couldn't stop.
No,
in those days. We just said, "Oh well, we'll clean this up later." And
keep going.
Poor Mary Irwin Scott and Joe Certo and folks like you who would come in and help us on that side of the camera, cleaning up in the kitchen and setting things out. People don't realize everything that goes on. They see what goes on the countertop.
Yeah.
But to the left, stage left of the countertop, there's all kinds of stuff going on
happening
all the time.
Yeah, there's a lot to it. Yeah, so it takes a small army. They're fun to do, but there's a lot of work in them. We're wrapping to the end of our time, and I always have a sign-off question for our guests.
Okay.
The name of the show is The Pittsburgh Dish. What's one of the best dishes you've eaten this past week?
Ooh. Well, I cooked myself all this week, and I have to say the thing that I made, and I don't, once I make it, I don't know why I don't make this every week. I made some arborio rice for risotto with a ton of mushrooms in them. Now, I used to make it with dried mushrooms, and I would rehydrate the mushrooms.
Yes.
They have a lot of flavor and whatnot, and that's not a bad idea. But this time, I just bought baby Bella mushrooms, but I mean a lot.
Yes.
Maybe a quart-size basket, and chopped them up and fried them with a little bit of onion and not much, just a dash of salt, a little bit of parsley. And then I made the rice. Oh, I made it in my Instapot.
Oh.
Which I found, makes arborio rice, makes risotto better than I can with all that stirring.
Wow.
And so I put the rice in the Instapot, 1 cup of rice with 1.5 cups of water and 1/2 cup of white wine and some butter, about a quarter of a stick.
It's nothing.
And then I put all the mushrooms that I had served for something else that were left. I put them in there and put the thing on. It's 10 minutes on low pressure. And Laura and I were sitting there going, where did this come from? No strange ingredients, no nothing, but it was so flavorful and the mouthfeel was great. And if I had gotten this in a restaurant, I would be raving about it.
That's the best sounding mushroom risotto I've heard in a long while.
And easy peasy, as they say. Oh. Now, next time, would it be the same? Probably not, because I'm not a chef. And I'm always tempted to tweak it one way or another. But I could go. I remember it well enough that I could go back and try to make it the same.
You have to jot it down. I'm the same way. I'm a tinkerer. I'm always fiddling. I need to write my stuff down. Chris Fennimore, thank you so much.
Doug, I didn't let you get a word in edgewise here.
It was amazing. And I'm looking at all of my questions. You just kept answering them. So it couldn't be better. Chris Fennimore, thank you so much for being on the Pittsburgh Dish.
Well, thank you, Doug, for all of your support of what I do and for giving me this chance.
Of course. Thank you. Be sure to catch Chris Saturday mornings on our local PBS station, WQED, for QED Cooks, as well as their other great programming. You can also follow Chris on the Facebook page, QED Cooks. And finally, we thought that mushroom risotto recipe sounded so delicious, we're leaving a version up on the blog as our recipe of the week. We have instructions for Chris's Instapot method, as well as a traditional stovetop version. Hope you enjoy it. That's our show for this week. We'd like to thank all of our guests and contributors, and to Kevin Selecki of Carnegie Accordion Company for providing the music to our show. We'll be back again next week with another fresh episode. Stay tuned.